Welcome back. I am super excited about what we're going to do right now. But let me just give you the facts of something that you need to know before we get into a new Brian and Bob one-on-one here, going with regard to one of these cases and breaking it down for you. And it regards a Massachusetts woman who was accused of fatally stabbing her husband to death back in January of 2021, and it's set to face trial this month. Christine Ricci is charged with first-degree murder in the death of her husband, Michael Ricci. Now, police responded to the couple's home after their 16-year-old called 911 and discovered the victim had been stabbed to death in the heart and on the back of his left shoulder. Ricci told investigators her husband came in after shoveling snow outside and an argument ensued and that he had pushed her. She says that after that, he had lunged at her and she had a knife in her hand and she plunged that knife into his chest. Though prosecutors argue there is no evidence to suggest that her husband came after her, they are going forward with this case on murder trial despite the defense presented by the defendant. And so welcome back to a special segment of State Your Case here on the Law and Crime Network, where we will each put our prosecutor and defense hats on, and you guessed it, we will state our cases. And in this chat, I will be taking the side of the prosecution, and my co-analyst, Brian Buckmire, will argue for the defense as we explore whether or not the issue of self-defense can come into play here and how it will come into play here in the trial. Attorneys would argue this case in front of a jury, and how would they argue that case in front of a jury? Now, a disclaimer. The arguments presented by the attorneys are strictly for entertainment purposes only and do not reflect the true opinions of the commentators themselves. Brian, it feels like old school. It feels like we're back to doing it again.
Let's do this.
Let's do it. So, all right, state your case, Brian.
All right, so I've got 4 parts of how I'm going to state my case, right? First, I'm going to start off with a juror that I want. The typical juror or stereotypical juror that a defense attorney wants in a self-defense case. I want a man over the age of 35 who have women in their family, sister, mother, something like that. The reason why I say that, I found, I know it's a little bit gender kind of stereotypical, men are more okay with violence being an answer to a problem, I found in jurors, than women. What I mean by that, this is a self-defense case. I want as a defense attorney to explain to a juror that she's okay to use violence and stop thinking or analyzing past that. Large man coming after her. He's a 23-year Boston firefighter and a U.S. Army vet. He's bigger, stronger. She needs the knife to protect herself. I need that juror to agree with me and say, that's okay. The theme of my case, because of his background, I'm going to say, and we have some mental health issues on both sides, I'm going to say that he brought war back home. A lot of people in their professional careers, I know you and I as attorneys sometimes bring our professional careers back home. Sometimes I cross-examine my wife. She doesn't like it that much. All right. This man, the trauma of war came back home, and that's what I'm going to try to get in the the battered women syndrome here, that she was living in a war zone because of his mental health issues coming back home. On cross-examination, the biggest problem I see in this case for me is the single stab to the heart and the cuts to the back. Cuts to the back typically do not denote self-defense. I've got to somehow explain why the angle of those cuts are still her defending herself, even though his back either may be to her or that he's reaching and getting cuts. Last on cross-examination, I got to put this all together. These are 2 people with mental health issues. I'm going to try to slide in some self-defense, also some heat of passion. I heard that he had an affair and they're trying to get through it. Maybe something got a little too heated. Maybe some fact popped up. I go for the heat of passion. Maybe I get voluntary manslaughter. I go bang or bust for self-defense, and I try to win it all.
Okay, well, he's trying to win it all. So I'm going to now have to state my case here from the prosecutor's standpoint, and I respect these arguments. Look, lawyers have to know what the adversary is going to do in order to make a confrontation of the evidence. Brian did a great job with that. But I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to start off with motive, okay? So he is having an extramarital affair, so there's motive. I'm going to blunt the passion provocation defense and the self-defense with the word that's often used in the law, reasonableness. Is it reasonable to believe that a person would be infuriated? Reasonable to believe that they would cause, for passion provocation, a murder, and reasonable that they did not have a cooling off period and there were multiple days that went by there. So I think there goes the passion provocation defense. I'll also indicate that as a prosecutor, I'm going to use an evidence rule 404B, which is called other act evidence, to show there's evidence in the case that not only has she been abusive to him, not only did she cause injuries to him, check it out, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, she used a knife in a previous incident. Isn't that a shock? And Brian got the biggest factual issue. Listen, you danced with the one you brought on the defense side, so I appreciate it. But the biggest one that prosecutors love in a self-defense case, you don't get any better than injuries to someone's back. A stab wound or an incised knife wound to a back belies the statement that she made to the police. Last part on the self-defense argument. Self-defense isn't that I felt uncomfortable, I felt afraid, I felt I was going to get assaulted. The law is where prosecutors are going to hammer the law, that it has to be a reasonable belief that you were going to die or it was going to be serious bodily injury. That reasonable belief has to be both objective, that is that the jurors agree that it would be that way, and that in fact she felt that way. The second thing for self-defense is that there was no retreat. We can make an argument here that there could be a castle doctrine argument that they have in Massachusetts. I don't think it's going to apply. So she has a duty to retreat. But moreover, you cannot use force in excess. You cannot use force in excess to the force that you're confronting. It's called proportionality. So just because you're scared, or just because you're upset, and you know what? Just because you think you may get assaulted by this big bad army guy, which by the way, I would certainly be objecting to, saying that that should not come out, does not allow people to just plunge knives into the heart and back of an individual. So there's me stating my case, Brian. We got some time here. Look, from a defense side, you did a great job. Passion, provocation, self-defense. It's all driven by the facts and the law. Yeah. So what do you think of the argument? Do you think that's what prosecutors are?
I'm going to argue that his military status should come in, not because there's any negative aspect to it, but she is aware of it and knowledgeable of it. His size and his experience of how to kill is something that she can definitely rely on, that this person has the ability to harm me. He is much bigger than her. He's a firefighter. His job is to pull bodies out of burning buildings. You think that he can't cause deadly force to her? There's many case laws, especially in New York, where they say the difference of size and gender, we afford certain people weapons, because the 6'4", 250-pound firefighter against a 120-pound woman, yeah, we put a knife in her hand because, like she said to the police, she was trying to get him to back away. But in his mind, this is war. You don't back down, you keep going. In her mind, I hope he stays away from me. I hope he stays away.
Look at you.
I want to put her on the stand. I'm putting her on the stand.
Okay, all right, but wait a minute. Like, you know, he lunged at her and she plunged a light knife in his heart. Why would he be lunging at her in the first place? Maybe it's because she pulled the knife out ahead of time and he was afraid that she was going to stab him like she did the last time.
Why does she keep going to the knife? Why does she need a knife to protect herself from her husband? Why is this man who has multiple mental health issues? I'm going to go deep
none of which have been documented, by the way.
I'm going to go deep in, okay, not documented? Fine. I'm going to get an expert to talk about battered women syndrome. I'm going to get an expert about how war comes back home with many men who go to war. I've already made that my theme. I've already probed on, I'm going to talk to his friends, I'm going to talk to the firefighters who have been talking to him about his life. The fact that I think the defendant says that he was out like mowing the lawn in a manic state for 3 days. If I can raise these issues enough to the point that I can get an expert and the judge denies me, great, appellate issue. We go to appeal this if I lose. But if I could put enough roadblocks in your way, you better jump over all of those hurdles to try to get a guilty verdict.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you right now, I don't think that that's going to happen. And I think that we are in, I would be arguing in summation this archaic idea that just because it's a man and just because he did military service, that somehow that predisposes him to being a violent human being, especially when the evidence shows that previously she's the one that had assaulted him with a knife. That maybe the shoe should be on the other foot. She's got the mental health issue and she's an abusive person, because we can agree that women can be abusive to their husbands.
100%. So what happened in that last case with a knife? She wasn't prosecuted, right? I'm going to find out why she wasn't prosecuted. And I'm pretty sure that if she pulled a knife the first time and wasn't prosecuted, there's a proper reason for why that case got dismissed. I'm bringing that issue up again.
Yeah, and I don't know whether it was dismissed or not. In truth, I don't know what happened.
Doesn't have a record for it, though.
But you certainly something that's going to be looked into. And even if it was dismissed, prosecutors under that Rule 404 are going to try to get it in. Doesn't mean they will get it in. Brian Buckmire, always love having the debate with my man. All right, so that was a lot of fun. Got the blood moving on that.